All right, good morning, everyone. Uh, so we will start our discussion on bottom-up parsing in this lecture, and we may require a couple of more lectures to finish the discussion on this topic. As you know, in top-down parsing, we construct a parse tree for a given input string by starting from the root node, and we keep expanding the parse tree. That's what we do in top-down parsing. So we start, so there is a context-free grammar G that is given, and then there is an input string W, and we would like to check if the string W belongs to the language described by the context-free grammar. And we have two approaches. One is top-down. We have already seen this approach. In top-down parsing, so with respect to derivations, we start from the start symbol and we keep going forward until we generate the string W. In terms of the parse tree, we start from the root node S and we keep expanding this parse tree until this parse tree expands to the input string W. This is the approach in top-down parsing. In bottom-up parsing, and top-down parsing is quite intuitive. Like if you don't know any theory of parsing, and if you are asked to construct a parser, you would naturally end up constructing a top-down parser. Whereas in bottom-up parsing, what happens is we start with the string W and we would like to discover the derivation in the reverse process. So we want to use a sequence of reductions. The opposite of reduction is opposite of derivation. So we want to use a sequence of reductions in order to arrive at the start symbol S. So we discover this derivation in the reverse order. And then the construction of the parse tree also goes from the bottom. We start with W and we slowly want to converge to the root node. So we construct the parse tree in a bottom-up fashion in the bottom-up parser, and we construct the parse tree in a top-down fashion in a top-down parser. And the other thing is in top-down parsing, the derivations that we construct, it is leftmost derivation. And we will see in today's class, in bottom-up parsing, the derivation that we construct would be a rightmost derivation. This is the summary picture. So this bottom-up parsing can be applied to what are called as LR1 grammars. Or in other words, this bottom-up parsing is also called as LR1 parsing. So the first L in this LR1 stands for that the parser reads the input from left to right. And the second and the letter R in LR1 tells us that the derivation that we are going to construct is that the parser is going to construct is a rightmost derivation. And the one here tells that the grammar is that one symbol look ahead is used by the LR1 parser. The interesting thing is almost all programming language constructs, they are parsable using the LR1 parsers. So that means we are in a very good shape with respect to programming languages. And LR parsing is the most general non-backtracking shift-reduce parsing method known. There is a third important property for LR parsers, that is an LR parser can detect a syntactic error as soon as it is possible to do so on a left to right scan of the input. What it means is if you take a string W and so far the parser consumed U, a prefix of the string W, that is U, it consumed U, and if there is no way to extend this U, such that UV belongs to the language described by the context-free grammar, then immediately the parser will say that the input string is not a string uh, described by the context-free grammar. This is what is called as a viable prefix property. Viable prefix property. So that means if this is an input string, so the parser keeps reading until there are extensions of this prefix. There are extensions of this prefix which takes us to a string which is present in the language described by the context-free grammar. But as soon as it hits a prefix for which there exists no valid extension, then immediately the parser recognizes it as an error. This is what is called as a viable prefix property. And LR1 grammars are strictly more powerful than LL1 grammars. So if you see LR1 is equal to LRK, that means whether you use one symbol look ahead or K symbols look ahead, the power of the bottom-up parsing technique remains the same. So LR1 is equal to LRK. The second idea is there is a set of context-free languages which are called as deterministic languages. That is, those languages which can be recognized using a deterministic push-down automata, DPD. And all the languages which can be recognized using a deterministic push-down automata, they are LR1 parsable. And when we think about context-free languages, the set of context-free languages is equivalent to those languages that are recognizable by non-deterministic push-down automata. And then LLK is strictly contained in LRK. So LLK is strictly contained in LRK. And we also know, so this, and we know that LRK is equal to LR1. And we also know that LL1 is strictly contained in LLK. So this is the general picture. So if later on, maybe in the next lecture or in the lecture after that, we will also study what are called as LALR1 parsers or LALR1 grammars, which are derived from LR1 grammars or LR1 parsers. An important thing here is be it LRK or LLK, all of them, they correspond to unambiguous grammars. So if you start with an ambiguous grammar, then it is neither LRK parsable or LLK parsable. But the interesting thing is, as we have seen in the case of LL1 parsers, when there is an ambiguity, there are two ways of resolving the ambiguity. One is you rewrite the grammar to eliminate the ambiguity. That is one way. The second way is you tell the parser to lean towards certain kinds of parse trees consistently, which suits our semantics. We do a similar thing in the context of LR1 parsers also. So let's take this example to understand where the power of LR1 grammars comes into picture when compared with the LL1 grammars. If you look at this grammar, you know this grammar is not LL1 parsable because if the current look ahead symbol is left parenthesis, the current look ahead symbol is left parenthesis, then the LL1 parser doesn't know whether to use the substitution rule A or the substitution rule B, because both can possibly generate a left parenthesis in the input stream. And it is not LLK parsable because, let's say, no matter what the value of K is, you can have a sequence of K minus 1. If you are using K look ahead symbols, then you can have a sequence of K plus 1 parenthesis followed by A or B, and then, like this. So no amount of constant look ahead can help in deciding whether we should be using the substitution rule 1 or substitution rule 2. That's a problem. Of course, we can possibly rewrite this grammar and make it LL1 parsable, but if you take the grammar as it is, we cannot parse inputs. We cannot design a backtrack-free parser, top-down parser, using constant look-ahead symbols. But on the contrary, in bottom-up parsing, what happens is you will see that we will use a stack. So what all the left parentheses, we keep pushing into this stack. And finally, so all this input will be consumed. And so all the k plus 1, the stack will contain this whatever the number of left parentheses. And then when the parser looks at A, then it knows that it has to use the substitution rule 1 and then carries out the derivation process by using a sequence of reductions. So this ability to use the stack to shift the symbols so that they can be referred to or use it later is what gives the power to bottom-up parsers. So this is an important example I would like to keep in mind in order to compare and contrast between LR1 grammars and LL1 grammars. So now let's get into the theory of LR1 parsing. So we will have few definitions and then we will have an important construction. We will try to get some intuition behind these constructions. But we will still need one more lecture in order to get a complete picture of what is happening. So we have the definition of what is called as an LR1 item. An LR1 item is of the form A goes to alpha dot beta followed by a terminal symbol A, where A is a substitution rule of this form. A goes to alpha beta and A is a terminal symbol or a dollar. So dollar is also a terminal symbol. So while working with LR1 parsers, so we implicitly have a new augmented grammar. We work with augmented grammar. That is, this is the base grammar and we augment this grammar with this substitution rule. S prime goes to S dollar, where dollar is the end of file symbol. So example LR1 items are here. So you have a substitution rule S goes to L equal to R. You put this dot at the beginning, which is allowed. In this particular case, alpha is equal to epsilon and beta is equal to L equal to R. Sorry, this is equal to means, yeah, you know what it is. And A is ID. In the second case, second is also an LR1 item. In the second case, alpha is equal to L and beta is equal to R. And A is ID. So this dot can be positioned anywhere in this in L equal to R. Like in the last here, if you see this particular LR1 item, so here alpha is equal to L equal to R and beta is equal to epsilon and A is ID. And similarly, these are some other examples of LR1 items. So you have dot here at the beginning, dot here at the middle and dot here at the end in these three LR1 items. And dollar is the terminal symbol that we have that is occupying the second position in this tuple. Any terminal symbol can occupy the second position in the tuple. You cannot have an epsilon symbol, but any terminal symbol can be present in the second position of this tuple. This is what is called as an LR1 item. So now consider LR1 sets of items. An LR1 sets of item is a collection of LR1 items. So like for example, here we have an LR1 item set I1. It has two items. So this is one item and this is another item. There need not be any relationship between these two items. Just take a collection of LR1 items and put them together. You will get an LR1 set. Similarly, in LR1 set I2, you have three items. This is one item, this is another item, and this is another item. So this is a grammar that we will be working with for the rest of today's lecture. This is the grammar that we'll be working with. And the next idea is what is called as closure of LR1 items. So if you take an LR1 item set, the closure of that LR1 item set, so let's say if I is the set of LR1 items, we are defining what the closure of I consists of. Closure of I consists of every item of I. This is the base condition or the base case. And then for every item such as this, A goes to alpha dot B beta followed by A, this B is a non-terminal symbol. Then what happens is we can use this LR1 item to expand the closure set a bit more. And how do we expand it? So we look at substitution rules like B goes to gamma. And then for every terminal symbol that is present in first of beta A, we add an LR1 item like this. Put it in other words, so let me make it clear. Let's say we have an LR1 item. This is your I, and let's say, so from this I, we want to construct a closure of I. To start with, closure of I consists of everything that is present in I is also present in closure of I. And then we start with this space and we keep expanding this closure set. We keep expanding this. And how do we expand this? We take a substitution rule such as, not substitution rule, we take an LR1 item such as A alpha dot B beta from the closure set. When we pick it from the closure set, it can be present in the base set I, or it can be present in the expanded, the currently expanded set I. And what we do is, like B can have different substitution rules, like B goes to gamma 1, so on and so forth, B goes to gamma K. So there can be K different substitution rules associated with the non-terminal symbol B. And then we will take one more set of terminal symbols, and all these terminal symbols, they are present in the set first of beta A. We ignore B and we compute first of beta A. Let's say there are L such symbols, A1 to A. What we do is we pick a substitution rule here, and we pick a terminal symbol here, like for example, B goes to dot gamma I, AJ, we pick like this, and this we include in the closure of There are lots of symbols, but we will try to understand this, how this closure thing works through an example. So there are few example problems we have here. Let's try to see, let's try to get intuition about this closure set computation through these examples. Let me share the whiteboard. So here, remember the grammar. This is the grammar that we have. I am writing this grammar here. Two substitution rules here. Two substitution rules. R goes to here. So this is the grammar that we have. So now what we want to do is, the first LR1 item set that we are considering is this. Let's call it as this item set as this I1. It has only one item. Yeah, it has only one item. Now we want to compute closure of I1. So when we want to compute the closure of I1, what we do is, the first thing that we do is, every item that is present in the base set I, in the base set, we include here. So there is only one item that is present in the base set, and that we are including here. And now what we do is, we look for items which look like this. Alpha dot B beta followed by terminal symbol. This dot should be present before a non-terminal symbol. Here we have only one item, and in that item, this dot is present before a terminal symbol. So this LR1 item is not a candidate for expansion. So the closure of I1 in this particular case is I1 itself. It cannot expand further. So now let's take one more interesting example. So let's start with, take one more example and try to understand the closure construction. So the item set I2 is this. It's a set. Okay. So this is the item set that we have. And we want to compute closure of I2. And what is the first thing that we do? Every item that is present in I2 is also present in the closure set. So this item is present as it is, and this item is also present as it is. If you look at these two LR1 items, they are the same on the first coordinate, they differ on the second coordinate. Here, the second coordinate is the terminal symbol equal to, and here the second coordinate is the terminal symbol ID. But what is interesting here is this dot is present. If you now let's consider this LR1 item. In this LR1 item, the dot is present before the non-terminal symbol R. And if you consider beta in this case, so if you see this beta, so beta in this case is epsilon. And beta concatenated with the terminal symbol beta A. So let me use this turns out to be equal to symbol. This turns out to be the equal to symbol. And R, if you see, R has two. There is one substitution rule. R goes to L. So what we do is, so we add this LR1 item. R goes to dot L followed by equal to. So we are adding a new LR1 item, and this LR1 item is derived from this LR1 item. Okay, so essentially what we do is, whatever that is present after this R, and this terminal symbol, we concatenate it. And when we concatenate it, what we get is the string equal to. And first of equal to is equal to. So for every substitution rule associated with R, we construct a new LR1 item. And in this particular case, the associated with the non-terminal symbol R, there is only one substitution rule. So we add this LR1 item into this set. So now what we do is we go to the second LR1 item. The second LR1 item also, from the second LR1 item, we will construct this, because first of epsilon concatenated with ID is ID. And so what do we do? So here, remember the set before. So for every substitution rule here, associated with the non-terminal symbol R, and for every terminal symbol that is present in the first set, right now ID is the only thing that is present in the first set. We pair them together and we generate a LR1 item like this. You will understand the reason behind this when we look at the construction of LR1 automata. Next is, so after that, now we move to this one. So here again, epsilon concatenated with equal to is equal to, but then associated with L, there are two substitution rules. So let me associated with L, there are two substitution rules. One is star R, other is L goes to ID. And then if you look at first of epsilon concatenated with equal to, it is equal to. So this is nothing but first of beta A. And what do we do? So we say L goes to dot star R followed by equal to, L goes to dot ID followed by equal to. So now this is taken care of. So now we come to this LR1 item. And when we come to this LR1 item, by applying a similar logic, we get all right. So yeah, and then so this is taken care of. And when we try to expand, see if this LR1 item can generate any new LR1 items, it turns out to be the case. It's not possible because the dot symbol is present before the terminal symbol star. So this cannot generate new LR1 items. This also cannot generate new LR1 items. This also cannot generate new LR1 items, and so is the case with this. So the closure expansion has stopped. So if you see how this closure is working is, you start with the base set of items I, and then you expand it by adding a few items. And then using the newly generated items from here, we try to expand this further. We add the new items from the newly generated items. At some point, what happens is this set becomes closed. That means we cannot expand it any further. That's the reason this is called as the closure. And this is the idea. This is how we construct the closure for a given set of LR1 items. Let's try to look at one more interesting example and see what happens. So the example that we have here is, so this is example 3. Normally in a physical class, I ask the students to try out one of these examples so that it becomes clear to you, but now we are in a virtual setting, so I am doing it for you. But if you do this expansion, this closure computation for once by yourselves, then you will understand so what the definition of closure much better. And what's the grammar that we have? The grammar is this is the grammar. So now let's see. So we want to compute closure of I3. So we start with S goes to L equal to R dollar. And so here beta is equal to R. First of equal to R for concatenated with dollar is nothing but equal to. So in terms of the set here, we have this L goes to star R, L goes to ID, and then here we have equal to symbol, which is first of equal to R dollar is equal to C. So we add two rules. Uh, L goes to dot star R. Yeah. L goes dot yes. So L goes to dot star R followed by equal to, and L goes to dot ID followed by equal to. So this is how it works. So this is taken care of, and this LR1 item cannot generate new LR1 items, and this LR1 item cannot generate new LR1 items. I have one thing though. So none of you asked this question. I made a mistake here in one of the examples. Can anyone point out the mistake I made in one of the examples? Is there any mistake in this particular example? Maybe you can type it in the chat box. Do you see any problems in the LR1 set computation? Or you can enable your voice and talk also. That's also all right with me. Are you with me so far? Just wanted to check how you are doing. The dot placement in set I3. No, that is perfectly fine. I think in set I3, we started with dot L equal to R. Yeah, in example 3, I think we are all right, Shantanu. How many of you are with me so far? Can you put a message in the chat box so that I can see whether you are with me or not, or what's going on at your end? Don't understand the purpose of dot. Yes, I see. You will get the intuition in a moment about the purpose of the dot. So there is one mistake I made, which you missed. I just want to fix it. That is in the first example. This is the first example. If S goes to, yeah, actually, no, we are good. So there is no mistake. So I thought there is a mistake in the first example. So L, so if the dot is before a terminal symbol, we don't need to do anything. And there is only one such LR1 item. So we are good. Okay, all right. But let's say this is set 4. I change this item to this. Yeah. So I thought this is the case. So if this is the case, things could get, did we consider this example before? Let's try to do the closure set computation for this. Closure of I4, just so that you can recall, I will quickly write the grammar again. Great. So if you see this closure, we start from this. And so associated with R, there is one substitution rule. So while processing this, we add R goes to dot L followed by dollar, because beta is epsilon, and whatever that is there after R, you concatenate with dollar and you compute first of that, you get dollar. This is what you have. And then with when you process this item, you generate two more new items, dollar dot ID followed by dollar. And this cannot generate new items, this cannot generate new items, and this whole thing is the closure of I4. Great. So this is the closure set computation. So now we will see how this closure set computation helps in the parsing process, and what is the intuition behind this closure set definition. So let's go back to the slides. Nice. Yeah, so this is the grammar that we have. And we start with we construct now what is called as an LR1 item, LR1 automaton. We construct what is called as an LR1 automaton. So we start in this LR1 automaton, it is a collection of states. An automaton is a collection of states with transitions between these states. We start with the state I0, and the base item that we include in the state I0 is this LR1 item. S prime goes to dot S followed by dollar. What it means is that we are anticipating a string which is derivable from the non-terminal S followed by dollar. That's what this LR1 item means. That is, we are anticipating a string that is derivable from the non-terminal symbol S followed by dollar. And this particular statement can be expanded into two different forms. You know, S has two different substitution rules. So we say here that we are anticipating a string derivable from from L, which is derivable from this form L equal to R followed by dollar. Or there is a second way in which the story can unfold, that is the string that is yet to be consumed. It is derivable from R, the non-terminal symbol R, and followed by that we expect to see a dollar or end of file symbol in the input. And this story kind of further unfolds as follows. Since we are expecting a string that is derivable from L to start with here, we say, no, like we are anticipating a string that is derivable from star R followed by equal to, because equal to is immediately present after this L. Or there is other possibility that we are anticipating a string that is derivable from ID followed by equal to. And the story that gets unfolded here from this LR1 item is that we are anticipating a string that is derivable from R, that is derivable from L followed by dollar, is this is how this story unfolds. And yes, and then if you see here from this, these are the two things. This is how when we are anticipating a string that is derivable from L followed by dollar, then we say that, like we are anticipating a string that is derivable from star R followed by dollar or ID followed by dollar. What I mean to say is the state I naught captures different ways in which the parsing process can unfold. So if you want to draw a tree diagram, so you can draw a tree diagram like this. So the beginning of the story is you are expecting a string that is derivable from the non-terminal symbol S followed by dollar. And there are two ways in which this story can unfold. One way the story can unfold is that the string is derivable from L equal to R followed by dollar, or the string is derivable from uh, uh, R followed by dollar. So these are the two ways in which the story can unfold. And then when we go here, we say, like from here, we are anticipating. So L goes to dot star R followed by equal to, because equal to is present immediately after this symbol L, or from L you can generate an ID followed by sorry. Yeah. So this should be equal to. I'm not able to use the eraser. So like that, you see the different ways in which the story can unfold is nicely captured in the state I naught of this LR1 automata. So now let's keep going and see. So now we are in state I0, and this is the initial state of the LR1 automaton. And so when we see a string that is derivable from uh, from S, then what happens is we go to a state I1, and in state I1, what this LR1 item says is that we have already consumed a string which is derivable from S, and we are anticipating dollar. Let me there is some problem in the pen, so now it is working. So when we are in state I1, what it means is that we have already seen a string that is derivable from S, and we are anticipating the end of file symbol dollar. That's what it means. And we move from this state to this state by consuming any string that is derivable from the non-terminal symbol S. So this is what is called as a, so let me come to a goto function bit later. And let's say if we consume a string that is derivable from L, then what happens is this LR1 item and this LR1 item becomes active. So we move this dot over this L in this LR1 item to generate this LR1 item. And what this says is that we have seen a string that is derivable from L, and we are anticipating equal to and some string derivable from R followed by dollar. And so there is another LR1 item which is also a valid candidate to move forward to consider in the future. That is, we have seen a string that is derivable from L, and we are anticipating an end of file symbol. So this is what is called as a, we will see what is called as a goto function. Goto of state I naught when, and the second, the parameter, it is of type non-terminal symbol. This is equal to I2. So this is what it is. And here we say go to, this is of I naught. And when we move S over dot over the S, we get the state I1. And when we move dot over L, then what it means is we have consumed a string that is derivable from R, and we move to state R. And when we are in state R, we are anticipating a dollar as the next symbol. And we have already seen a string that is derivable from R. Because of that, the dot is present after the R here. And here, go to of I naught comma R is equal to I3. Let's keep going. And when we move dot over star, this is what we get. So you can see that we can move dot over star from this LR1 item and from this LR1 item. And this LR1 item gets transforms into this LR1 item. When we move this dot over star, that is when we see a star in the input stream, then this dot we move over the star and we generate this LR1 item star dot or followed by the symbol equal to. The same is the case with this LR1 item. We move dot over star and we get this LR1. So now what you can see is when we are in state I4, this dot is before these two, before the non-terminal symbol R. So what we have to do is from state I4, there are multiple ways in which the story can unfold. So what we do is we compute a closure of these two LR1 items. And these two, which are marked in red, they are called as kernel items, because the rest of the items, they are non-kernel items and they are derived from the kernel items. And here in I2, we don't apply a closure because we apply the closure, but closure of I2 is nothing but I2. It cannot expand further. Same is the case with I1, same is the case with I3, but with I0, when we apply the closure, all these items got generated. And let's see what happens. And when we move dot over ID, then this becomes active. So, and this becomes active. And what happens is we generate a new set I5, LR1 set I5, and the kernel items of state I5 are this. And closure of I5 is I5, it cannot expand further. And when we are in state I2, what we do is we try to move this dot over L over equal to, and we get this state I6 with the kernel item here, which is marked in red. And when we apply closure, the new items, these non-kernel items will be generated. 3 non-kernel items will be generated. So like this, what we do is we keep moving this dot over terminal and non-terminal symbols, and this whole LR1 automaton, at some point it is not possible for you to generate any more states. Okay, so if you try to move dot over, you pick a state and you try to move dot over some terminal symbol or non-terminal symbol, and the newly generated state is already present. And so the entire LR1 automaton gets closed after some finite number of steps. And once we have this LR1 automaton, what we can do is we can use this LR1 automaton to guide our parsing process. All right. So this is the summary of today's lecture, that given a grammar, we want to construct an LR1 automaton, and this LR1 automaton helps us or guides us in the bottom-up parsing process. And how it exactly helps in the bottom-up parsing process, we will see in the next class. But today we got some partial intuition, and in the next class, when we try to run through an example, you will get much more intuition about this LR1 automaton. So with this, I conclude today's lecture, and if you have any questions, you can ask me. Let's see. Yeah. So this is the whole LR1 automate that for the given context-free graph. Are you with me right now? So to some extent, how many of you are with me here? Is the kernel item I0 always? Yes, the kernel item for the state I0 is always this. This is the, no matter what grammar that we work with, so this will be the starting point. Let me erase all in one. Yeah. So no matter what grammar you start with state I0 with that particular kernel item. How many of you understood the construction of the LR1 automaton? Can you put a message on the chat box so that I can see whether you are with me or not in today's lecture? I will give you one small problem, and if you work with it, you will understand. That is true. So uh, it's when you, the number of states in LR1 automaton, it could explode. It's a problem. As you can see, for a, you can manually construct an LR1 automaton for very small grammars, but beyond that, you definitely have to write algorithm or programs to construct an LR1 automaton. And in fact, that's what your Bison parser does. It takes your grammar and it constructs an LR1 automaton for that grammar, and it uses that LR1 automaton to parse an input stream. All right, so if you don't have any questions, we will conclude today's lecture here. I would like you to go back and review this material, especially the construction of the LR1 automaton and the intuition behind the construction of the LR1 automaton, and come prepared for the next class. So if you don't have this grounded, then the next set of ideas that we see in the next class, they will not be clear to you at all. So please review this material before you come to the next lecture on Saturday. And on Saturday session, we will see how we can use this LR1 automaton, this constructed LR1 automaton, to guide the parsing process. That's all for today. Yes.
So in homework 6, how do we go about the proofs exactly? Because I understand how the rules work intuitively, but I can't find any way of proving it.